valuable enough on this topic. So let's pull up the thread here. Let's make sure that I have everything set up here. I literally just got home, and I timed this to when I just got home. Though I thought I would have more time than I actually did to prepare. Which is admittedly my fault, however, here we are. Okay. This looks about right. So. Here we have Caboozled's thread. Let me read this message from Davo saying, I apologize if I'm not commenting stuff a lot. I'm working on midterms, but it's important. I hear all the time about stuff as much as I can contribute myself. It's all good. I mainly just viewed this as like as a thing for me to get out what I have been saying about this. So if you haven't seen it, last night, Caboozled made a tweet, now with over 107 likes, reading, I was debating whether this was worth posting up, but I think it's necessary, so I'll go ahead and say this community could really do a better job at presenting itself. And then Caboozled goes through how he thinks that the community could do a better job at this. Just gonna make sure that no notifications get in the way from Discord or anything like that. So Caboozled's first, I'll just go through all the points. I'll go through my initial responses. And I'll kind of give more commentary on them, and we'll just talk about it a bit. Because the TLDR is that I do not think Caboozled's hitting the nail on the head. I think that there are definitely some things that we can do to make the community a bit more of an easier place to enter, but I do not think it has to do with much of any of this. So to start, Caboozled thinks that our tournaments are rarely taken seriously, and tournament organizers rarely effectively promote their prize pools. He thinks that tryhards annihilate streamer lobbies to the degree that people are genuinely afraid to stream the game. He thinks that we act as though saying "yeah" and "cute" is just normal when it really is not. And then, to elaborate on tournaments taken seriously, he says, a large part of this is the fault of the commentary, especially for Tetris events. It often feels like the comms aren't even remotely trying to be decent commentators. Add on to that, TOs will seemingly let anyone commentate, and it's a real issue. And then he says about the last point that some people will be offended. He doesn't say he has anything personally against it. You just can't deny that it's not a good way to be taken seriously at all. It's genuinely uncomfortable and cringe from an outside view. So this was the thread from Caboozled. We got some people agreeing. Got a couple of quote tweets on the matter. See if there are any of these. Just like some general responses in agreement to the situation. And then there's some discourse to this in the Modern Tetris Tournament Organizing Discord, which is a public server. So anything I mentioned from there is something that you could theoretically see. It's not really a private place. They would say, I feel bad that this is mostly Tetris related since I don't have much exposure to that scene. And we'll kind of get to how the statement's branded and all of that in a bit. But first, I will kind of paraphrase what I wrote last night when this first dropped. I figured that at the time, it could be somewhat beneficial if I chip some words in regarding the specific response. So one thing that I think a couple of us were confused about is I think the most confusing thing here was like, I feel like the part where Caboozled spoke about people not taking tournaments seriously is either worded wrong or it's just not the case. Because I'll just cut the music for the rest of this for now. Because Caboozled did clarify later, which is why I'm glad I posted this before I had this talk, or before I decided to stream this, was so that I could kind of get a deeper perspective on things and then continue commenting on it. I initially didn't think I'd do anything of the sort like this. However, I just figured it would be a good way to kind of talk about the state of the community right now. It's been a long time since I spoke about it last. So, Caboozled then clarified to me, saying that what he meant by the events aren't taken seriously part is he meant that certain players in Tetris tournaments kind of sometimes BM, and they do not seem to take their bracket run seriously. And Caboozled thinks that a reason for this is because certain tournaments' prize pools are not large enough. Which is an interesting thought, and it does have some merit. If a player does have a larger potential to win a prize, they might take a certain event more seriously. However, I wager that at this point in the community, should money be first? When we're looking at the overall seriousness of an event, should the money be first? And money will always have a factor, especially when you look at something like Square One that had $3,000. You have TCWC that had like $2,000. You have Tetris Journeys, which have all had either several hundred or $1,000 prize pools. But I still think we're at a point where our players do enjoy competing for merit rather than for money. And in general, the larger community, I think, does see events like your Tetris Cups, which may not raise a lot of prize money, as a big event. And I know this because as the Liquipedia articles have been recently been created, for those of you who don't know, Tetris is getting added to Liquipedia as an esport wiki for Guideline and Classic Tetris games. And a lot of people argued that all Tetris Cups should be under the S tier event category, until some people stepped up and thought that might be oversaturating S tier events. So people do hold these tournaments with merit. But as Cabbage is here, it is absolutely right that player and viewer perception will be different. But if we want to look at it overall, I think more top 100 players than not will take a tournament relatively seriously. And this is just from my personal observation when people have played in tournaments that I've watched or tournaments that I've ran. And viewers definitely hold events to a high regard. So I think in general, I think this is just, there's definitely a subset of players that do not take certain tournaments very seriously. Which a way to fix it is money, but I don't know if that's a good long term. I feel like frequency could play a factor as well. Which is something else that was talked about in Liquipedia. Some events may be held too often, which perhaps in a player's mind might diminish the prestige. And yeah, we're mostly just crowdfunded right now. And something that people did talk about, which I think is a good point, is that a lot of TOs do not do crowdfunding effectively or even note the existence of the crowdfunded prize pool. Because you see stuff like PK tournaments, Infinite Finesse has started doing it, where the prize pool's on a chat timer. You'll have your commentators mention it every now and then. You'll have your commentators mention certain amounts of donations. You'll have base contributions to the pot and all of that. And then there are certain other tournaments like Team TSD events where the prize pool is just kind of tacked on the prize section in Matcherino, or not in Matcherino, in Battlefy, and you're just left there, and you kind of hope that something happens, which is on the part of the organizers, and I can see why people do think that the prizes are important. They wouldn't pay more attention to those events. And Willie does bring up a good point. Crowdfunding is going to be hard with a young and broke crowd. You don't see a lot of Smash crowdfunding, and I don't know how successful it would be for a similar reason. Of course, Smash has more people, but if we relatively, like, if we want to do a dollar per capita thing or whatever, like, okay, with the notable exception of Smash Summit, Smash doesn't really have crowdfunding, and Smash Summit has excellent marketing for their prize pool. Like the whole first portion of experiencing a Smash Summit is about crowdfunding and about donating money to the prize pool and to BTS when they were a thing. RIP BTS. Which I thought about having a completely different talk about BTS, but I could do that for another stream. I'll leave it out of this one. But that was just the first part. It's just like I think from a broader community perspective, people still do take these tournaments seriously. I just think a certain subset of players who are at that, maybe at the highest level, maybe more financially motivated, might see certain events as lesser than others, but I'd hope that overall people take the competitive scene relatively seriously, especially for people who are playing in lands or higher earning events. Like if you're playing in a Square One or a higher earning Tetrio Journey, or let's just say the TCWC, its official circuit. Like those have paid decently well. And as I'll talk about later, I do want to find more ways to sustainably compensate staff and players, which I will talk about later. It's not something that Caboozled explicitly mentioned. It's more of what I personally think can be done to help the community that wasn't mentioned here. But yeah. So what I responded to the next point about tryhards. This is something that I think most if not all people who read this will agree with. It's the most solid point in Caboozled's thread. And yeah, as I was saying earlier, I don't think they should be either. I can just see why certain players would prioritize it. What's up, Sharky, and what's up, everyone tuning in? And by the way, I'll be putting this edited on YouTube, so if you miss a part of it, you can either go back in the VOD after this, or I'm gonna chop it down. If you invest money into marketing, and I'll also speak about that later. Right now, I'm covering the thread. But next up, Caboozled talks about these stream snipers. Basically, it kind of floats around the community anytime a larger non-Tetris personality starts to try out and play the game. And often a lot of people are very interested in this. They want to see reactions, so they'll go in, they'll pub stomp these open viewer lobbies, and it can create, yeah. And this will normally have two results, depending on what streamer you're kind of seeing. So you'll either have a streamer be like, "Oh my god, this is so sick! It's fast Tetris." Like there's this one streamer however long ago that did it had like a Vince HD show match or something. Like you'll either have that kind of streamer, or you'll have the streamer who's ridiculously unmotivated after getting bodied several times, and they will not touch this game again. Oh yeah, we're talking about Rubber Ninja. Yeah, their name slipped my mind. But I think this is the largest problem that we have mentioned here. I think it is also one of the hardest to fix. I think Firestorm replied to the tweet thread and was talking about top players, how most top players that Firestorm interacted with, they said just kind of played the game to play the game and didn't like outwardly try and pub stuff any lobbies or something, which I do believe a decent subset of top players do fall into that metric. I didn't know about this until Caboozled's thread came out, so I do think it is a good thing because, of course, opinions are great, and also it's kind of making info like this stream sniping server more commonly known among all these people, which was a really disappointing thing to hear about. I don't know why. I mean, of course I know why, but it's just a shame to me that so many people would be enough assholes to where they just try and target people who are trying to have fun with the game. Because especially if you educate these people about the game, you have more fun. It's gonna have a more positive effect on the scene. It's also true that you don't have to be a top player to ruin a lobby of new players. I just think this is like it's directed towards, I guess a better way to put it is like this elitist kind of group who want people to think that they're better than everyone else. And the challenge is going to be, how do we fix this cultural issue that affects this subset of people? Because I do think that the silent majority is not affected by this. They just enjoy tuning in. They enjoy watching these streamers. They enjoy seeing their reactions to a Tetris or whatever game they happen to be playing. But there is always a vocal minority for a silent majority, and they often can ruin the party in situations like these. And that's just the hardest thing to address for me, because myself as a person, even after sleeping on it and thinking about this, it is the hardest fundamental problem that we can tackle here. Because it would require a lot of policing or new policies being added or information being easily accessible to a brand new streamer who just happens to open the game. And that's a very hard thing to design. There's been talks about this in MTTO, and Modest says probably the server you left. And yeah, the issues definitely magnify that Tetris is a hard game to get into. But it's just like, this is definitely the hardest issue to solve, and I don't have I don't really have an answer for this one. I feel like it's out of my realm of expertise, perhaps. And as Cowbow just said in the chat, Tetris with like a super high skill floor compared to other games where you'll see stream sniping exist, like battle royale games like Apex Legends or Fortnite, which is pretty obvious to figure out how to play a shooter, or at least the basic elements of playing a shooter. It's just like you don't know. Like I don't feel like many people know what to do here. What I'm hoping for is that someone fucking smarter than me will figure it out, because it is not me. Sharky saying one streamer I watched stopped doing community Tetris nights for that exact reason, which makes sense, especially since a lot of casual streamers who want to do community nights, they don't have the time and effort to get that deep into the game. They don't have the time and the effort to even reach a lower of high level. And Austin in chat saying, in Tetris' case, it's also a thing for me to address, right? It's a game design issue in a way. I'm saying something like automatic handicap this year, prompted for or even enabled by default new players' lobbies. That's a pretty decent idea. And again, it's just like, I did know it was out of my realm of expertise. I figured that someone more oriented into like the game design part of the community, whether it's just someone else who has a background or you specifically, would have an idea. I think I know what you're gonna bring up. Like, I think in the most recent time I saw, um, like if we wanted to say stuff like that, like in certain times when like big communities will check out Tetrio for the first time, there'll be like special stuff added to the game, like just like some gimmicks that will be put into lobbies, which are definitely fun to look at. Though depending on the streamer, they might just want to fucking play Tetris. But of course, that's something that you can read the room when that's happening. I was talking about gearing the game design towards the community and not outward, which is also something to address. But I feel like someone smarter than me from the game design perspective will figure that issue out in due time. It's just not me. I design tournaments, not games. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why I'm a TO. I've tried designing games before. It clearly didn't work. So there you go. Next point that I can talk about here, and we can circle back if we need to, if other people want to bring up points. I'm definitely down for that. We have the nya and the cute point, which I think is probably the most subjective of anything mentioned here. And this is where I talk about the language of the tweet. With some more context, we figure out that this tweet is probably more directed towards the Tetrio sector of the community. We're not talking about Tetris as a whole here. However, I would wager that even in certain Tetrio portions of the community, I don't think this is an issue, especially outside of Tetrio. This is rarely a thing that happens. And Star's asking about this. I know Star's a regular TEC streamer, so this kind of plays into my point here. So basically, I think this stems in a server called Tetrio Amateur Weeklies, where this all started. There's like a community dynamic around like yeah, and just like calling people cute and whatever, just stuff like that, which some people might appreciate, and others it might be beyond their boundaries. So I kind of see this as a like it's on the person type of deal. And as Moose just said, different subcultures are in different games, and different games have multiple different subcultures. There are Tetrio communities where the neon cute thing is not present. There are larger ones like Taz where it's more apparent. Some streamers decide to go along with this same kind of community, the same kind of subculture that's been built up in Taz. There are some Tetrio streamers who do not. And I think from the inside, Taz in those places are very large. I think our proportion of how much it represents is slightly skewed. Tao's general challenge feels like a spillover of people who felt displaced by the quality rules enforced in Tetrio Discord. Which that might be how it appears. I'm not sure if it started in Taz or not. I just know that's where this culture exists in its larger spot. And you might not be personally a fan of it. You might personally be a fan of it. I just think at that time it's up to the decision of the player to decide which sub communities they want to participate in, right? And this is just what I personally think. Like, if you're fine with it, you can go become a member of Taz. You can play in the tournaments. You can interact with the people. Also present in certain groups in Classic. I have seen that. Classic's outside of my realm of expertise, of course, so I can't really make comments on Classic. And I just think it's like, and my basic take on this is like, as Oscars mentioned, the Tetrio Discord is designed to be outward facing, and that is where most players will end up finding one of their stepping stones. And as you just said, it's going to depend on person to person whether they find this cringe or not. It's a personal preference type of deal. But I don't think it's a problem if larger communities like TAWS have a subculture like this. These do exist in other games. I don't think it has an effect on bringing people in. But I just think it's up to the person. And I think Os has a good perspective on this. It's like all in jokes, fun where you're in on the joke, right? What the fuck? They say the N word. Oh my god. That was a thing of all time. Oh my oh my god. We're getting some truth dropped in the chat, I guess. Holy shit. That's fucking wild, man. That's fucking wild. And I guess there's an example of another community space which you might not find very attractive to a new person. The player base is a place like that Discord server. It's just on the other side of the spectrum. And I've always made the point that like TAWS operates more like a community than an organization, just because of its size and the frequency of its events. Whereas if you look at like Team TSD or PK or places like that, like there's not inherently that kind of behavior. Like it's not exactly there by default. If you feel me there. Feel free to bring it up, Moose. Chat is open. I just felt like this would be interesting to stream too because it's so much easier to hear other people talk about this. And ZXZX says is true. You're going to have orgs that spend more time on making themselves more open and more professional appearing, and then you're going to have more casual, laid back community spaces. I think TAWS is definitely a more sort of community like place. Rather than like this is the organization. Oh, we run tournaments. We are strictly competitive. Hmm. Moose sent me something interesting. I'm gonna think about this here. I'll let you say your words here in the chat, and I'll follow up. But now that I did get this brought up, I do remember the discussion was first happening. I was talking about policing language and stuff before. I think a few other community leaders thought it was overreacting to people casually using the N-word in several spaces. Now this this is different. And this is something that was happening. So let's just like let's just make this clear, all right? You should not feel like it's up to interpretation to use the N-word casually. And then try to flip that over to something kind of as harmless as calling people cute. If you feel what I mean. And yeah, I do kind of agree here. Like, are we thinking about the right thing if we want to police people? Plus, you're always gonna have different people acting differently in entry-level spaces, and keeping it tame to a certain point is acceptable, but we have to figure out a reasonable boundary. That said, personalities shouldn't feel like they have to change their presence online or how they interact with people or how they run their community because we're worried about someone not liking being called, or like someone calling a streamer something cute or using ya or having like a Kakaro avatar. And that's just a simple thing. My TLDR is that I feel like in certain situations, or mostly all of them, the Nya thing, we're making it a little bit too big of a deal. I'm sure it's not the fact that people do whatever. It's just like even what someone interprets as being excessive nature. And that's something I can see ask, but some people might be familiar with it in other communities, and generally, if we look at the largest official servers for each game, you look at the enhanced server, you look at the Tetris server, I think they're largely ran as decent open-facing communities. If you're looking at individual third-party leaders to try and be more open-facing, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to them on how they want to run their own communities. But I think the largest catalyst to bring in each player is doing a fine job. That's how I see it. But I think for now, we're going to move on from the language topic. Or at least, I'm going to move on from talking about the language topic. Feel free to keep using the chat, but I probably won't be entertaining it because I have more to talk about. And I got limited time to talk. So, final bit. here of the Caboozled section because we kind of covered the last tweet of the thread, not cover the middle last, which is Caboozled saying, elaborating on tourneys, a large part of this is fault of commentary, especially for Tetrio events. The complaint here is that people do not, at least to some people, it appears that commentators are not trying. I will say that out of any game that I've tried to staff commentary for, the hardest game to cast a dynamic duo or whatever you want to call it would have been for Tetrio. I feel like a lot of on-air talent for Tetrio, if you wanna put it this way, have kind of been embraced in the inner community and can subconsciously take those traits into the booth. However, I feel like we also have talent that can play it up a little bit more seriously. And I feel like more often than not, we strike that chord. And I also think for PPT and for TEC, we have some great talent that do a great job. For Tetrio, there are so many names to pick from that it's a bit hard to cast correctly. But with PPT and TEC, at least from my part of the TO, that's how I see it. And this also runs back to TAWS. I think a place like TAWS is that community meetup type beat. If you feel me. And Tetrio commentary will always have a scar on it because, as ZXZX said, the high level of gameplay is so high and it can catch new viewers that's such a shock that it would be hard to circle any of it back down to earth. And this is just how I see it. I don't think it's entirely a lost cause. It's a very difficult job. And I still think that one of the best, in my personal opinion, one of the best fast Tetris commentators we have had in like our lifetime is Delicious. He just had some magic with how he did play-by-play. Made it so easy to understand. I just feel like at that point it was a natural gift, and I would say out of any game to learn how to commentate, Tetrio would be the hardest. With TEC, you can learn zone. PPT would probably be your second hardest, because if you're thinking about mixed verses, you'll have to pay attention to Puyo. But really, there are only a few commentators who have it knocked. But it doesn't mean I don't think we have good Tetrio commentators, you know? And the great Tetrio or Gestrous commentators that we do have been commentating for like 5 or more years at this point. This has a cap on, oh my god. Like, we're so many years in on those casters. A lot of people we have barely been in for a year. Right? Any VODs you'd recommend look over at comms? The Gestrous Cups, probably 4 to 7 have Delicious commentary, if I'm remembering correctly. It's either Delicious or Modest, and they're both really good. They're both really good old-time commentators. They know what they're doing. They have great charisma. I'd say for TEC, Davo and Commando are great. Anyone that was Square One or TEC WC casted does a great job. For PPT has a larger number of consistent faces because we kind of rotate in and out on commentators. But I think they all push that in well. And PPT has a more homey vibe to its commentary, just because of the nature of the game. HDO 12 as you and Dell. I recommend that then. You two commentate as a duo. Hard drop open 12. That's the VOD I'd be looking for if you wanna know about the commentary that I'm talking about. And for the YouTube viewers, I'll link that in the description. But I also just think like we have like people who are 4 or 5 plus years in. A lot of people who we have the opportunity to cast for a major event have less than a year of experience. We also have to remember that we are still grassroots, and grassroots esports will always have this homey feel to it. Because it's just like that. It's grassroots after all. It's by the community for the community. So it'll just, until we cross a certain border, it will always be like that. I just think you'll always have an essence of it. We can break away from it a bit, but I think you'll always have a little bit of that there. I'm thinking for overall modern, Davo, because viewership overlap is a thing that we have. How would you approach improving commentary on the modern side, more so Tetrio? I don't think the analysis skills of any particular commentary are lacking. I just think that like if you're stepping into the commentary booth, you kind of need to put into your head like, I'm gonna need to do some more clarification for new viewers. I'm gonna need to like step it back on inside references, just as like we were talking about earlier. If you just step it back and approach things more vaguely in a sense, or broadly, I think is a better way to describe it, you're gonna create something that's easier to follow. And I think one thing that we could start integrating is talking about the history of each player a bit more. I know, at least when I'm on commentary, I like talking about the past of players, how I've known them. Because normally, which is crazy I say, I still feel like I'm a fucking baby, but I've been around longer than a lot of people now. So I just like to talk about how I've seen players in the past, how they've evolved, how players are playing now. If you integrate little mini history lessons and like, you know, fess up a little bit on your SDPC loop, blah 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 terminology, like we're already a good step there. We're already a good step there. I think CTWC is great at telling about each player when they're commentating. It's somewhat granted to the slower game pace, but you also just have good charisma on air and a little bit of background knowledge. You can make stuff happen. I feel like his first commentary started the whole banter style, and I feel like I have a crappy impact. Nah, the banter style is everywhere. I just feel like we have more banter style commentators compared to analytical. And I feel like a vocal subset of people like analytical commentators. And for a new reviewer, they'd believe, and that might even be true, I don't really have an opinion on it, that analytical commentators are the better move. I think for some commentators, it's hard to banter on IO. It's be hard to, or it will be hard to play by play. It'll depend on the person, and like if you're in a place like TAWS, you can have an easier time bantering. If you're more on the outside and you're like a TSD caster, you'll probably be more focused on the game. And it's just gonna be as our scene evolves. We're still young, And it's like, we have a long way to go. So I think there are grounds for commentary to be improved. We also need to think about what we're working with. We have volunteers. We're still grassroots. It's just like it'll be a slow ride before you see more analytical commentary. But I don't think it's going to be impossible, especially with moves that I think certain TOs are thinking about in the production. And a lot of the time, it's just like having the opportunity to cast a good duo that works well with each other is just going to increase by a ton. You have good commentators that work solo. You have commentators that work well with generally anyone else. But then you have two people who work really well together. If you put them in an event, it gives it some character. What I mean by analytical commentary, just focusing on the game. I'm using the term analytical very loosely. In this context, I'm using is they're focusing more on the game than on banter. I don't mean it's different from play-by-play. I really should be wording this differently. It's just a commentator that's honing in on the game nearly 100% versus a commentator who will spend some time working on entertainment value. Banter in earlier sets isn't all of a bad thing. The further in the tournament you go, the more analytical the commentary should be. And generally, when you have pairs swap out, this is what you're going to want to aim for. When I go for comms, I try to think of what narrative I'm constructing. I know my play-by-play is usually more face value, reading zone attacks to his advanced state, but I see my interest has been getting stronger over time. And yeah, you just get better with practice. You get better with commentating more events. And finding those duos are really difficult. I feel like we have a few that stand out, and we're lucky to have them right now. But over time, they fade in and out. Willie, that is true. I think the only way to I think the only way to do true analysis is when we get to the point in production where we have advanced replay systems, and after sets, where we're tossing to an analyst, who does all that analytical work, which you'll see in sports and other esports. And yeah, like IO, it's hard to do it. You talk about the commentator's entertainment value versus just repeating what's on screen. That could be a good thing to talk about. I think at certain times they're going for the more banter style. You do need to have that personality. Or you need to accentuate parts of your personality rather than just being an echo chamber. But I don't think this is that big of a problem with certain sets of people. Like I don't think that's a big issue. I think an issue that's been cited by people is that commentary doesn't seem too serious, and that there should be more focus on the game or appeal. It's really a lot of we're banking a lot of players to be ambassadors, and it's hard for that to happen. We're banking on community leaders to want to be ambassadors for the broader game. Thank you, Nitro. These comments can really be applied anywhere. I feel like if you read certain statements in this tweet, you can put a picture in your head to what is being thought about when these comments are generally made by people, where specifically they're talking about. So that puts me on to the fact that I've mentioned every broader point. I don't have a lot of time left for this, so I'm gonna have to start speeding up. So I think the thread brought up some pretty decent stuff. But I think we're kind of looking at it wrong here. And I'll say this because at this point, I still think we are capturing the community we have, rather than trying to spread things outwards. Of course, we'd love more people playing, we'd love more viewers, but I still don't think we're engaging everyone yet. We're engaging everyone who's already here. So I still think that homie feel is beneficial, at least in my eyes personally. If you're someone who's more into expansion, you probably won't think the same. But that's just how I see it right now. I just kind of agree with this Moose statement right here. Like, I think we're doing a lot of things right, at least from the community side of things. We're creating engaging content. We're finding ways to bring people in. Places like TAWS can get people integrated after they start playing the game. Get them feeling welcome in a community if they enjoy it. They have other places just like the Team TSD tournaments are more laid back. I think the perspective of the cat thread is like, I think we're a bit too worried about it, you know? And we're a bit too worried about some stuff. Whereas what I brought up is I feel like before we try to attract more people, we need to control who we have now. I think that a big part of appearing more professional is going to be getting that code of conduct that's been worked on for a while rolling and getting it out. And getting all the major communities on it. So that you know wherever you go, you're going to be protected. There's a set of base rules and expectations for behavior to follow. And that people will be held accountable. A problem that we've had in the scene is that we've had various bad actors float around on certain sides of the pond while being prohibited from others. And I don't think we're assessing how big of an issue that really is. After the first few big problems, it's been hard to get anyone to unite on anything regarding bad actors who have a community-wide presence, which is inherent in people who have different opinions. But at some point, we need to compromise and suck it up and unite to a point where there's at least a base minimum punishment for people who do something wrong. Not necessarily a ruling Texas council. There's a fighting game safety committee, basically making decisions on the worst of the worst cases. Unfortunately, as a community's been sprawling, we've had more of these worst of the worst cases, and we've had to think about them. And it is really hard to unite on rules. However, it's something that is possible and has been worked on, and we're really fucking close, man. Like we're so fucking close, dude. We have this much left to do. We're almost there, guys. And I just think that that push is more important than thinking about anyone calling people cute. But I'm just saying on the leader side, this is something that a lot of us have been worried about. And we're close. And Caboozled, I think it's better to think of what do we need to do first before we're confident in opening our community up to the floodgates and getting a lot of people. Do we want to let people in when we can't actively deal with what we have now? I don't think we do. Some might disagree, but I don't think we want to prepare for like mass marketing and going mainstream if some stuff is sticking out that we can't handle now. I like that comment from ZX. Fixing what cannot be seen can help fix things which can be seen. And then my next bit is like talking about the money side. We need to actively promote our prize pools more. There are different ways to do this. This is mainly a Team TSD critique, so I won't hold on to it too much. And also, another thing on the Team TSD side they can really do well is I think we're at a point where we can really harness building relationships with some brands. Even though some people might see certain things as hard to attract new members, we are still getting people every day. I'm seeing new people coming into chats and stuff. They're sticking around. They're enjoying their time. It's not an astronomical growth pace like we've seen before when new games are coming out and all that, but it's a slow and steady, at least in the community side. I can't speak for the games, but on the community side, this is what I'm seeing. And yeah, Miles, that's a great way to put it. And I think I'm on the side where the infrastructure needs to be worked on before we think about like how do we get all these new players? You know? Like how do we get all these new players? But I think if we take advantage of marketing to who we have now, trying to grab sponsors, it can help. It definitely helped with the cost of like Square One and stuff like that. If we go down those avenues, we had brands that have been willing to work with our community, even as it is now, if it's seen as flawed or not, depending on how you view it. It would be good so that our more direct on the floor community people have more resources to build larger events that players will take more seriously, conters will take more seriously, stuff like that. And then my last bit with direct regards to the statement is I think it could have been marketed better. I think a CAB statement could have been marketed better. I think and Kevin already talked about this when we were first discussing this in the server, so this is something that he already knows. I just thought I'd note it here since I've been talking about it. And this is partly a fault of and like I say partly. It's not even majority, but it is a partial fault of Twitter.com being character limiting software. you can often be self-conned into making your statements more vague than they should be. And I think this honed in on a lot of stuff that was like Tetris specific discussion, that if you're reading it, even especially on an outsider perspective, you could be viewing it as a criticism of the whole modern Tetris community, and it doesn't necessarily apply. So this is definitely a Tetrio-centric statement. Um, you could say that certain issues or debates can apply to the modern Tetris side, or not like, well, to the broader modern Tetris side outside of Tetrio. But this was definitely made with Tetrio in mind. It was made with certain places in mind. So I'm just thinking with like the things I'm saying. I'm thinking about this from a broader facing perspective. I'm thinking about this of like how do we do this for the whole pie, even not for just 75% of the pie. I might be biased in this way, but I don't think that TEC or PPT or any of that deserves to be ignored in this discussion. Because they do have players. TECWC have a lot of players. Thanks to great marketing by the publisher. And I don't think it's fair to leave the rest of the games out. Especially when they don't have huge communities, but they have decent sized communities. Pipelines are there for people to go from game to game once they're into a game. And I think the statement would have been better if we honed it in a bit. If we mention Tetrio, we gave some examples. Stuff like that. Of course, it was meant to be a brief Twitter statement. I don't think this is like the most revised and like proofread statement in the world. It was just a casual drop, but it did get a lot of attention, especially for the community on Twitter, and something you have to think about when it has that reach. One thing I've talked about in the past on various different statements is like, I'm not saying it necessarily applies here, is sometimes personalities will drop messages or they'll drop tweets or they'll make comments about stuff, and I think they do not realize how many people see the shit they type. And this is definitely not talking about this specific example. I just think this happens broader in the community as a whole. I think sometimes we're talking about certain stuff, or being a little bit bleak or sour, and we don't realize like who's going to see this and how it can change viewpoints. When in reality, it can just be driven to emotion, which I think is something to think about. It's definitely not related to this thread, or at least not entirely. But yeah, it is an internet problem as a whole. But I think once you pick up a this is just something I've been saying in general. I think once you pop up the role of like a community influencer, it's nice to put a little bug in the back of the brain where you think a little bit more about your interactions and stuff. Shout out to Modest for mentioning those cum tweets. Nice way to break the ice here. Been too serious for a hot minute. I appreciate that. If you dig, you can find. I've seen a couple. I've seen. So I think my final roundup is, I think for the community to be more accessible, the first thing is the stream sniping issue fucking sucks, and if someone can figure out how to solve that, you're going to be a bastion of something. All right. The next one is, if we want to think about expanding the scene, we're gonna have to think about all the games, because no matter what we're intending or not, if we try to target a Tetris expansion or a PvT expansion or a TC expansion, it will spill over into every title based on how our TOs work. We organize for every game mostly. There are definitely Tetris only TOs, but the big players are involved in all the games. And as for T99, it's basically ran its course at this point. T99 is also a fucking nightmare to run tournaments on. Ask me about it. I'm one of the only sad souls who's tried. I'm one of the only sad motherfuckers who's tried that shit. It's fucking hard. Don't try it, man. Don't ever. But yeah, just like, don't be a piece of shit. While I think certain community spaces could be more accessible, like was mentioned, I don't think that we should have a full-on community rebellion to try and remove like our inside jokes, the Nyaku thing. And as Moose brought up, there are other things in certain spaces that we need to be more worried about than people calling each other cute, even if it's relatively often. Like, I just don't think we are quite there yet to complain about that. And I just don't think most people see it as like the biggest problem on earth. We're definitely on the same side here. We just have different, like, I think we all have different images in our mind of how to do it. And it's definitely a personal branding thing. I did mention in my written statement that it is a person-to-person thing. If people in the community generally, like, represent yourselves like that, it's up to you to do that. And like I said with the Tetrio Discord, they implemented quality rules and whatever. They did that. And for the results they've wanted, they've been relatively successful, I guess you could say. But at least with how I see it, Cav and I have two different directions. Cav's saying about the expansionist route, whereas I think we need to perfect what we have within before we open the floodgates, so that when we finally attract people, we have a perfect product, or not a perfect product, but we have an amazing product that we're showing off. And that's just really how I see it. When you get that safety stuff going, we need all that. But I'm about out of time for right now. If there's interest in the YouTube video, I'll do a follow-up maybe, where I run a more detailed talk about what exactly I do in the year to run stuff up and to make a change. Now I don't see anyone to raid, so I'm just going to head out. But if you're interested in more opinions and stuff like this, join my Discord. The YouTube video will up sometime in the next few days. I have to leave for work in 30 seconds, Moose. I cannot wait. I have to leave now, guys. I'll drop the raid to them. I'm gonna end. So I'll see y'all later. Be sure to join my Discord, check out my YouTube for stuff like that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll see y'all later.